For the main topic this week and probably the next 2 weeks, we are going to be discussing what does the species of wood do to the sound of a snare drum. So what I did was I commissioned Chris Carr over at Bucks County Drums to build. I said, you pick your woods that you would like to work with that would be best representative of the most readily available domestic species and the most popular domestic species. So in this, I'm going to talk with Chris here. I'm going to bring him on. We're going to talk about the whole thing, but they're identical drums. So the only thing different is the actual wood being made. So we're going to go through the next couple of weeks demoing all 6 drums, different tunings, trying to find the sweet spot. Hopefully bring in some guests to do some blindfold tests. We're going to have a lot of fun with that. But before we dive into all of that, let's chat with Chris about just how he made these drums and then some of his thoughts on what makes different woods sound the way they do. So here's Chris Carr of Bucks County Drums on the Prime Series Snare Drum Shootout.
Between that and the 8-ply, but I really dig the cherry because it just sounds like a snare drum like that right out of the box. Mm-hmm. It's kind of a little on the brighter side. So anyway,
let's get into it. So you built us 6 identical drums, save for the wood species. That's the only difference. So we can really go super nerdy on what does the different species actually sound like. So let's talk about what is the consistency. So all of these are 5.5 by 14-inch drums, correct?
Correct. All 8-ply, all alternating grain, horizontal inside. Same glues, same molds. I think the biggest difference between this comparison to the last comparison we did is that these are done exactly the same way. I have better molds, and I'm using a new glue and better clamping system. So the other drums are great, but these are just, from a builder standpoint, more consistent, more straightforward for me to build. I can train other people to do this process more readily. So they are exactly the same.
Straight shell, no re-rings.
Correct.
Bearing edge, you told me, but I don't remember what it was, 45?
Slight rounder on the outside, and then a 45. That's my standard. You've got 3 coats of a hard oil finish. And okay. I like this finish because it just really brings out the character of the grain of the wood and lets it glow, but protects it from the inside out. I could put on multiple coats. If I want to put on 10 coats, I could do that. But 3 or 4 is usually enough, and it's really silky smooth.
Yeah, it doesn't even look like there's a finish on it. It looks just like wood.
It's great for studio drums because it really lets them speak that much more. Even a high gloss finish adds a certain amount of brightness and a certain amount of weight on the shell, like a wrap. Okay. And that's not a bad thing, but so the only difference is in the species. And you've also got closed grain woods like cherry and maple and birch. There's not a lot of open pores. And then you've got open grain like the ash and the oak, with really, really porous. And then the walnut's kind of in the middle. It's closed grain, but it's got a lot of open pores as well. And that's kind of what helps give it its characteristics. So the biggest difference in species, and I think I should point out to people, is that it's more noticeable, I should say, in toms and in bass drums. Mm-hmm. In snare drums, when you're tuning at that register, at that pitch, it's a much higher tuning generally. And so it's not as noticeable. It's there. Mm-hmm. It's there, but it's not as noticeable.
Yeah, we'll find out. They all have 8 single-point lugs, triple flange, 2.3 steel hoops, yes. I believe. Did you put 16 wires on these?
Exactly.
Evans G1 coated on top, 300 on bottom. What else do we got here? That's all the specs. Let's take a look on the other side. Yeah, so let's go drum by drum, and you give me your assessment of what your experience with that wood has done. So let's start with let's go like soft to hard, and then we can talk about how hardness versus the grain structure affects the sound.
Sure.
So what's the softest of these 6? We have
that would be the cherry.
Cherry, okay.
Yeah. On the Janka scale, it's 950, but it's a closed grain drum. So you take that hardness and you compare it to African mahogany. It's very similar. It's almost identical, but you've got a more open. But if you listen to them, they have very similar qualities. but it's really nice. So as I said earlier, the cherry, it sounds like a snare drum right out of the box. It's kind of bright. Mm-hmm. It's got a nice punch to it. It's real open sounding, pretty versatile, and that translates to kits very well as well. Up from there, I believe, is the walnut. Mm-hmm. And those are, in that bunch, those are the two extremes, I would say, in terms of outside the normal. All those drums are actually really close in hardness. When you look at the whole scale, they're in that middle range. Mm-hmm. But cherry, and then you got the walnut. Walnut's got that dark, kind of raunchy, but cool characteristics. It's not going to have as wide a tuning range. It's going to be, it depends on what you want to get. And this is just like any voice. People are going to do what they want to do with these things and get the sounds they want to get from them. Up from there, I believe, is the birch. Birch is focused and punchy, a little drier. Mm. Ash is kind of like maple on steroids. It's got a little bit higher register bite to it, but it's also super warm and gutsy. And then you got the maple, which we all know what maple does. It's kind of fat and gushy and pretty versatile. I'm finding our maple shells are super resonant, so I have to step them up to 8 or 10 ply. And that's something I'm going to be changing on the website, is going to be going all the snares, instead of 6 ply with 3 rings and 8 ply, you're going to have 8 or 10 ply options. It's about the same amount of labor and whatnot, but I just feel it gives it gives a better sound.
Interesting. So, what made you go away from 6 ply with 3 rings?
It's just too much sound. I'm getting too much bounce back. It's kind of like I was getting with the semi-solid snares. The biggest reason I started making ply drums was the semi-solid drums were great, besides the amount of labor involved and the amount of work involved and the time. There was too much sound. It was just, you're getting a lot of sound from those drums. And in a snare drum, you don't need that. You kind of want it to be there and gone, unless you're going for a vibe or an effect, but you want it to be gone. And so ply drums does that perfectly. And so that's when I started about 5 years ago. Now I'm messing around with the whole ply, actually 6 years ago, the ply format, and started working my way through that, and then developed this whole new system I just love it. It rivals the semi-solids. I mean, it gives, I would say, a sound that most drummers are more accustomed to, and but it projects, gets into the audience, it goes out, and I hear that in the mics every day when I'm messing around in here. So yeah, so the differences are subtle. When you take all those drums, which I know you're going to do, and you're going to tune them all the same, they're not going to be drastic differences. When you get into major differences, you're going to go to really extremely soft woods, and you're going to go to really hard woods, like exotics, like Bibinga or Jatoba, Yellowheart, things like that. You're going to have much more noticeable, but you're also going to get different overtones. Harder the wood, you're going to have a higher overtone. The softer the wood, you're going to have a lower overtone and different and whatnot. And you're going to have a little bit more negatives because of those extremes, things that you're going to need to learn how to control, whether that's with tuning or muffling or whatever. So, yeah, it's kind of, these are all really usable species, I feel. These are all, you can put them in the studio. They're really common domestic woods. Your more uncommon ones are like hickory. Hickory is it's probably the most hardest. The hardest domestic wood is actually mesquite, but it's a real small wood. It's super, super hard. It's not a practical instrument grade type of lumber. So hickory would be next, and that's difficult to come by.
Okay.
In plies. So at least for me, so far, I haven't found anything.
So the oak is funny because I think of oak being so drastically different than walnut on a hardness perspective, but you're saying these are all kind of living in that middle world. Yeah,
between 900 and 1400, 1450 being the maple, the hardest, and then you got the ash, and then you got the birch, and then you got the walnut and the cherry. I'm missing one. What am I missing?
Oak. Where's that?
Oak. Yeah, oak. Oak is right between. You got oak, ash, and birch. Okay. So it's like bang, bang, bang. They're like 100 points. So what really separates them is the species themselves and the porosity, the open grainness. And there's no sealer on the insides of those shells either. not really necessary on a ply drum, unless you want to again go for a vibe or maybe a little more volume or something like that. So yeah, the oak is punchy though. It's a little drier.
Yeah, why is a maple fatter sounding than a softer wood like an oak?
Yeah, it's just the tonality it gives. It's kind of like Bubinga. When you take the harder wood, you expect it to have this ring to it, but it's got this depth to it, right? Mm-hmm. So generally speaking, with an extremely hard wood, you can go to a thinner shell, but with the maple, I'm finding it's kind of a balance. In terms of a really hard wood, it's not hard. It's 1450. There's much hard. There's woods that are 2 and 3 and 4 times harder, but yeah, it's just got that right combo. It's just the species that we've come to know that works, and then you find something that works. You don't. If it's not broken, don't fix it.
Yeah.
They're really. It's got the right combination of hardness and close grain. It finishes really nice. It gives a lot of resonance. Certain hardness gives a really nice resonant tone, and it's easy to work with, and it's abundant. You have to look at it from a manufacturer. I'm a big company. I'm a medium small company, but from a manufacturer standpoint, I'm going to go with stuff that's abundant and easy, relatively easy to get and affordable, and then I can keep my costs of my product down. Same with the big company, same thing, and it works.
So porosity versus grain structure, what's the difference? Are they the same? Is that the same thing?
Well, you got what they call closed grain, when the grain is more intertwined, and then you get out of the grain when it's more open. But then you got the pores. The pores kind of suck up the sound, kind of like acoustics in a room. When you have uneven surfaces or you have treatments on your wall, it does the same thing. Or like a hammered shell over, a brass or a bronze hammered shell over a straight brass or bronze shell. It does the same thing, dries it out. So that's what it's going to do, which is really odd about the birch, because it doesn't have that upper register that the ash has, and the ash is open grain. It's got a lot of pores to it, right? So ash was one of the big ones that I fell in love with. It was a big surprise for me. I think you said you liked it too initially.
Yeah, when I was just getting these things tuned up, that was the one that I found myself just playing the longest on. That's usually my first test. Like, which drum do I end up kind of zoning out on?
Right.
And that was the one. Like, walnut was like, cool, that sounds great. Cherry was like, wow, that sounds like an amazing drum. And I put the ash on. I was like, oh, let me try messing around for about 10, 15 minutes.
And I didn't even tune those. I mean, all I did was put the tension watch on it to make sure they were even. I did 75 on the bottom, and I think 85 up top or 90 up top, something like that, which is really the opposite of the way I tune a snare generally. But they're shallower, and they're a thinner shell, so they're pretty open. You got a single point lug, which keeps them open, and then a medium hoop 2.3 keeps them open. I was going for, I would say, moderately maximum sound, and that way you could hear the difference more. And, when you play these without snares on, you'll be able to hear the tone in the tom-tom mode, So.
Well, we're going to dig deep into each one of these over the next few weeks, but if you had to guess which one was going to be the taster's choice, which one do you think it would be?
Cherry.
Cherry? All right.
Yeah, just off the top of my head, because it's just different enough, but sweet enough, if that makes sense.
That's one vote for Cherry. What would be your second pick? Let's just get to Ash. All right.
And then Birch.
All right, there you go.
And I love maple, but it's like maple's been done to death. It's like, yeah, give me something different. No. So it's like, if these are I listen to them under the mics, and this is they speak. So this is what you want. As a recording drummer, or if you're a recording drummer, you're going like jazz. Like, the nice thing about Cherry is that it can really very easily become a jazz snare because it's got that brightness to it, but then you can do anything else with it too. So yeah, those are my top three.
As far as tuning ranges, what I found with the shallow metal drums was we didn't hear a discernible difference until you tuned a little bit lower.
Yeah.
Is it going to be the same, do you think, with the wood?
Yeah.
So high-tuned snare drum is a high-tuned snare drum in most cases.
In most cases, but and like I was saying earlier, when you get into extreme woods like Jatoba, Bubinga, or poplar, you start getting into really soft woods, basswoods, aspen, whatever, pine. I mean, You have to take a poplar shell or a pine snare. You have to make that shell thicker. So what are you doing? You're increasing the pitch of the shell to negate and offset the tubbiness of it, right, or the softness of it. So it's a balance. And my feeling is this: that ply shells, a well-made ply shell, is always going to be king. It's always going to be most versatile. It's always going to be most consistent. It's always going to be most reliable. And while the differences are more subtle when you tune them up, it's still most reliable. But it was like, again, when you get into tom-toms, you take a walnut tom versus, a maple tom. It's night and day. It has a lot to do with the tuning range. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, last couple of questions here. If I fell in love with the cherry snare,
yes, you can buy it.
Would it be logical for me to then say, why don't I get a cherry kit and get the same results? Or would you suggest mixing it with something else?
You can mix that with anything. However, our cherry 8-ply drums are fantastic. The first cherry generation I made was all 6-ply with re-rings, and they sounded good. I found going up to an 8-ply without a re-ring was just magical. It was amazing, the difference night and day. The yellow sparkle lacquer kit I just built for artist Rick Lawton, it's on our Instagram page, has an amazing tone to it. Just really open, just full sustain. You could do anything with it. It has a really versatile tuning range. It just blew me away. People, don't be afraid to mix and match. I would love to see like a cherry snare with an ash kit. You got a nice, even a natural finish, a nice contrast there. But you could finish them however you want.
All right. Now, then the next logical progression would be if, let's say you absolutely loved, I'm looking at the cherry and the walnut. Those two, you're like, I love them. Let's put them both in one shell. Would that be a disaster? Mixing and matching these species?
No. It can be. That's a combination I probably would not do. I don't think they would jive real well together, just off the top of my head. But like maple poplar, we know that works. I've been working with walnut and poplar, really good results, and just glued up a snare with its maple and walnut. So that's, I'm excited about listening to that. You're either better doing extremely hard and extremely soft, or very, very close. Another combination, well, I don't want to give away all my secrets. I have another combination I'll be working on pretty soon that I'm excited about. But you have to just try it. It's expensive to try it. It's time. But sometimes they're magical. I was really blown away by the walnut poplar. That was exciting. It's fat. It's got great attack. It's punchy, and it's versatile. It has a pretty wide tuning range. But even if it doesn't have a wide tuning range, if you get 2 or 3 sounds out of it that you're really happy with, and especially if you're a recording drummer, then that's all you need. And most guys, I don't know about you, but I'm not going to every gig and retuning my kit every time.
No, never.
I'm getting a tuning I'm really happy with, and if I'm playing blues, then it works. If I'm playing rock and roll, it works. Just get them sound. You got a good sounding drum, you can play anything. As long as the drummer's competent. I'm not competent. You're competent.
Well, I'm excited to put these things to the test, so we'll have tons of demos and comparisons. I'm going to go full tuning range on each one of these things so we can hear what, how high they can go and how low they can go and what falls in between. We'll let everyone listening pick their winners. And then we might be having all these drums up for sale, so stay tuned on that.
That would be cool. Just let me know.
All right. Thanks, Chris.
All right, brother. I'll see you.